Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back, Lea.
Thank you for having me.
So it's been a little bit. How long has it been since you last sat on that chair?
A year and a half a month.
Oh, okay.
I've thought about this.
Interesting. That's when it was released, or that's when we recorded?
We recorded Tezayin Kislev the day before my birthday.
Oh, right.
It released on Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. So, yeah, those were big days in my life.
The day of the recording and the day of release, both of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Big milestones.
I hear you. Okay, we won't go into that because then we'll lose where the idea for this podcast originated.
Sure.
So, Avi Wolf, right?
I'm privileged. I'm privileged.
So, yeah, just so I was confused, you're Avi's wife.
Yeah, but I'm Lea Rubashkin. And we're not going into that either.
Right, the conversation with the third podcast. So, Avi and I have spoken a couple of times, and I guess maybe connected to that or maybe disconnected from that. I've received in the last few weeks a number of calls from women who are finding out about their husband's addiction, which in my mind kind of goes hand in hand, right? If we're speaking about men dealing with their addiction, it could have been present for 10 or 15 years,
right?
Maybe even longer. Their spouse or family may not know anything about it, but if it comes to the surface, at some point in time, the wife finds out and there's an explosion that ensues. So I thought it appropriate to have a conversation with you as you've been on that side of it, on the side of finding out about a husband's, I don't want to, these are my words, not yours, right? You may use other words, but a husband's betrayal, addiction, or experiences, and you're here, still married to him.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God.
Right, yes.
Many, many, many big miracles from God. And a lot of, I guess, work on both of our parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of work on both of your parts.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to get to, because I'm sure if there's a few women reaching out, there's many more who are not.
I've also had women reaching out to me and men reaching out to Avi that they just told their wives, or their wives finally, confronted that. So it's very relevant. It's in the ear right now.
Got it. Yeah, which would make sense. Mm-hmm. Which would make sense. I think aside from anything Avi and I are doing, it seems to be a season of truth being exposed. Like a lot of truth is coming out, and I expect more. Just in general, in society, a lot of truth is being revealed and exposed for the last few years, and it seems to be a theme.
In a lot of davening on Shabbos, in a lot of the prayers, you hear how the world will rejoice when God comes to judge the earth. So there's this, these two emotions of, fear. God is coming to judge us, and yet at the same time, I'm very excited to hear that. Like emes and justice are God's ways. So I like hearing that. It's hard to be a part of a process that brings out truth, but you're living with your power when you're living in truth.
Oh, and amen.
Amen. So here we go.
Yes, here we go. So maybe let me start here, because it was one of the things that my wife did speak publicly. I don't know if you ever saw the...
You sent it to me.
I sent it to you. Yeah, so it was a private event for several hundred people in Canada. I'm trying to remember the year. It was probably around 2019. So I was a couple years sober, a couple years married at that point, but I was in recovery for a few years, maybe 6 years at that stage. And Benjamin Bressinger, who runs, I forget the exact name of the place in Canada, in Montreal, for addictions, held an event, and my wife spoke there. She hasn't published the talk. It's not a very good audio either. It was just like a cell phone clip. But occasionally I've shared it with people, and I shared it with one woman who had just found out about her husband's addiction. And when I shared it, she said, it's very insensitive to share something like this with someone who's very invalidating, or insensitive to share something like this with a someone who's just finding out about their addiction. So I responded. I said I wasn't trying to share what you should be doing. I was just trying to share hope, right? That there's the possibility of recovering from it. That there are couples who go through betrayal, and you're familiar with Esther Perel?
Yeah.
She says cheating can lead to a breakup or a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't tell you what to do in your situation. I'm not telling you what to do in your situation. But I'm just letting you know that it's possible. Like couples have, and that's all I was trying to share was hope. I wasn't trying to share any judgment. And her response back was that a woman who stays with a man after betrayal is weak. And I think it was like that thought that made me want to reach out and say, hey, let's have this conversation. You know, it's definitely in the air, so let's have it.
The first thing I would that comes up to my mind, or my heart, hopefully my heart, is I'm proud of that woman for answering back that it's insensitive, because I have hope for her that if she's so in touch with her feelings and she's able to vocalize them, then she's going to be okay. She'll get through this, and that's my hope. And the energy that I read from that story is she's feeling and she's talking about it. The idea that you're weak if you stay, it's very interesting. As a teenager, I philosophized a lot. I was stuck in my head. And I did think about, the concept of what do you do if this happens? What do you do if this happens? Instead of living life, I was planning life from the sidelines, not in the arena. And I remember having a conversation with friends around the topic of betrayal and porn. And I was literally future planning in my life, not knowing that this was going to be my life.
Right.
I remember where I was walking, President and Kingston, like these were real experiences. And I also thought that there's no way you stay. There really isn't a way that you can stay, and that it's weak to stay. I'm happy to unpack my story, but I will say that I did face divorce as a real possibility when it came up. It wasn't off the deck, out of the cards for me. And I'm happy that it wasn't, because when I felt into that reality and that possibility, it showed me so much. It revealed a lot for my marriage, for our journey, what had to happen if I was going to stay, what would happen if I left. I could share, let me think how I would say this. There was a period in time where things that Avi wasn't ever fully conscious of throughout his years in a 12-step program came crashing out of him. Things that to me were deep betrayals, and to him they also were, and yet he didn't have the safety in our marriage yet, or the safety in himself yet, to be honest with himself and to share them as they were happening. And so a lot of his journey was transparent, and yet these things weren't. So even as he was working his process of healing, we faced like a crashing point years into his recovery.
Okay, unpack this a little bit. They weren't transparent to him or to you, meaning he didn't know about it?
They were, both. There's a way that you can gaslight yourself. There's a way that you can say that's not considered betrayal. There's a way that you can really mean it. You have a sponsor. You have Ellie Nash as your sponsor. You're in recovery for a couple of years. No one thinks that warrants transparency. We can unpack a lot of what I'm saying. There's so many bullet points that I'm dropping right now, like transparency and my relationship to that in my journey. But cut me off at any point.
Well, I'll tell you something that I was thinking about right before you started talking, so maybe we're the same wavelength. So one of the things I noticed from the few conversations I had is that every woman I spoke to had a different definition of cheating. So for example, one woman I spoke to said, one woman was completely horrified by porn, right? How can he look at another woman? Another woman said, porn is no big deal.
Yeah.
But how can he meet with someone else? Like that was a major betrayal. And so a third woman said, the physical stuff is one thing, but when there's emotional connection, even if it's not physical, like that's the worst, right? So what was interesting to me was everyone's very individual experience, interpretation, and understanding of cheating, betrayal.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your take on that.
I see that too. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just thinking for the story that I was sharing.
That's why I'm thinking when you were talking about the transparency, let me connect it to what you're saying. When you're talking about the transparency, that there were certain things that in Avi's world may have not been a big deal. To whoever he was talking to, his sponsor, others may have not been a big deal, but then in your world were a big deal. That's what I was connecting. I was saying I was already thinking that, and you started mentioning that, so I said, okay,
right.
Let's dive into that.
I think very early on in my marriage, in my process with this, it became clear to me that transparency was going to be very, very helpful to heal this. That wasn't really the advice out, in this circle. There's a lot of protection of the wife. Don't dump on your wife. She's not the one that's supposed to be guiding your, holding your healing.
Right.
And I stand by that. That's all true and that's all fear. In my marriage, and there's no two marriages and there's no two relationships that are the same. So anybody who's dictating to you what you have to do in your marriage, any therapist, they're projecting. You really, really have to say this is their advice and this is their learned wisdom. And you get in touch with your own intuition and your own soul for what's going to work for my relationship. So in my relationship, it became clear that any love that I was pouring on Avi, a voice would come in and say, if she knew what I'm battling in my head or in my hands or in my heart, she wouldn't be saying that to me. She doesn't mean that. So I would, let's say, compliment him or a birthday experience or whatever it is. And inside, the love never settled on his heart because he never felt entitled or worthy of it. And because if she would know this, so even though you knew it, and even though the meetings knew it, and even though he felt this lack, there was still a layer between us, between our hearts, that if you knew my ugliness, you wouldn't want to be here with me. This started out not in a I would say holy way. It wasn't pure. Maybe in the beginning of our journey, my trauma of my childhood really made me a very hypervigilant person. And so for the sake of knowing what was happening around me, that felt safe to know.
To know everything.
To know what's going on here. Maybe like the first time Avi spoke to you and he came back into the house and he said things that were like, vulgar or whatever, my body became safe. And I felt that when you're honest, there's something to work on here. If you're being honest with yourself and with me, like, okay, what can't we overcome, but we have a chance to overcome. I don't know if that was coming from, I really think it was coming from my soul. There's a voice inside that says maybe it was your ego that wanted to hear it. But where am I going? The transparency for us was really what led to our breakthroughs.
Right. I mean, being on the other side of that, some of the stuff Avi shared with me about the level of transparency between you guys was something that it wasn't the way I lived in my relationship. It may be a story I've shared here, but I'll share it again. So after I shared the addiction with my wife, right? So she knew I was in recovery. She knew I was struggling with addiction. She knew the aspects of it, which one of the things I've shared in my own journey is that there is a catharsis in just kind of putting everything out there, but sometimes that can put someone through a lot unnecessarily. And one way I usually counsel guys is not to, one way I'll often counsel guys is not to speak in images.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes the way we talk generates images in the other people's minds, and those images can sit with someone for a long time. So, for example, if I say to my wife, "Hey, I'm struggling with porn," that's far different than detailing where I was when I used porn and the kind of porn I went to, and like just a lot of graphic images, and then the images get stored as memories much deeper than, much more entrenched than, say, words do.
Yeah.
In any case, at this point in time, my wife knew about my addiction, knew about my recovery, was in the process, and at some point when we're in the room together, we're getting ready for bed, and a white chip fell out of my pants. Right, and a white chip in recovery means you slipped, and you're recommitting again to your recovery. Okay. So we weren't married at this point, and she quickly blurted out, she says, "Why'd you pick up a white chip?" So I said, she understood, right, the recovery parlance. So I said, the same reason the same reason I've always picked up a white chip. So she said, "What'd you do this time?" So I said, "There's an answer to that question, and I'm happy to share. I just want to make sure that I'm not sharing because it was just a quick thought. You blurted something out and I blurted something out. So think about if you want an answer to that question. And if you do want an answer to that question, I'm happy to give it, but I don't want to just answer just because you asked it without thinking." So she said, "Good point. I'll get back to you." Maybe a half hour, an hour, she came back to me and she said, "You know something? I don't need to know the details. You're in recovery. I feel good with you right now. You speak to your sponsor, you have your other people. Like, as long as you're doing that, if I feel good, I don't want to know anything." So she said, "For me," she said, "if I don't feel good with us and I ever ask you if something's going on, and there is, then I want to know. But if I feel good with you, then as long as you're committed to your recovery, I don't need to know more." And that kind of became the basis of our understanding.
That's a really incredible story because I love, from my own experience, the ability that you have to pause and ask, like, what is the intention of sharing this? And under what pressure or circumstances am I dropping this in between us? Like, anytime you share shame without first sitting with it and processing it and asking yourself, where did this come from? Like, why did this happen today? Or why did this show up? And you're just being transparent for the sake of, you need someone to hold this with you. That's a very rushed, unhealthy, potentially yeah, explosive experience. But more than that, it's Frady being in touch with her own heart, to be able to read the energy between you and say, if I feel okay, then I know that I'm safe. Right? She's really, really trusting her heart, her feminine heart, more than her intellectual head of what are the facts? Am I safe? She's not asking those questions to her head of, if Ellie did this, am I safe today? She's being in flow with the energies that are current and are happening right here. And she trusts herself and you and God and whoever, that's enough for her to work with. So I think that's beautiful. Bringing it back to myself, I didn't trust my ability to read energy. Today, that's, thank God, where I am much more. But for most people who are not living from their heart and who have had like real trauma or pain in their heart, this processor, their heart processor, becomes, you're living life without that tool. And
right.
Yeah, you end up resorting to
data,
yeah, and other tools that are much less truthful. But it's okay. Like, the process of holding space in your head can also lead you to your heart. So we get there.
Right. One of the things you said in terms of, recovery guiding against it, right? Sometimes, yeah. Which is true. I'll share from the recovery standpoint, the way I understand it, not necessarily my individual experiences of it, but just recovery in general. So one, in the book of AA, it says, which is dealing with alcohol addiction, right? Not sex addiction. It mentions that when it comes to sex, like, every person's life is individual. Like, relationship is individual, the life is individual. Right. So that's just one thing. It definitely recognizes that. But when it comes to the steps itself, right? So you have you have the 12 steps, right? And the first 3 steps are kind of more ideas, right? Preparing oneself to have the set of beliefs necessary to embark on this process of recovery. And then there's kind of the work, right? The middle of the steps are the work, and then the back steps are the maintenance. So it's really in steps 8 and 9, which is the last brick of the deep work, right? So the preparation is in 1, 2, and 3. The maintenance is in 10, 11, 12. And then 4 through 9 is the deep work. And steps 8 and 9 specifically deal with how to make amends. And the way they read is, in step 8, we make a list to all persons we had harmed and became ready to make amends to them all, which is a very interesting process, as I am prepared to right all of my wrongs. Doesn't mean I'm going to go do it today, but I'm prepared. So recovery really wants someone to get into that mind space of preparation without action.
Wow.
I'm ready to face all of the consequences of my actions and prepare oneself for that journey, whatever that means, right? In some cases, it can mean prison for people, right? Depending on what their actions in. In some cases, it could be repaying massive amounts of debt. It could be anything. It can go in a lot of different directions. And then step 9 reads, may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So we were totally prepared, right? If we just collapse it too, someone will say, oh, I don't even have to go on that journey of being ready to make amends to that person, because anyway, it's just going to injure them or others. It's a separate step. Be ready. You be prepared. And then separate from that, if you make the determination that the only reason I'm not going to do it is because it's going to injure them or others, not myself, it's going to injure them or others, then don't do it. But where I'm going with this is it's at the end of the process. And that's what we'll often say to people is get through some of your work before you sit there dumping on someone's head all the experiences. But I understand from what you're sharing is, hey, I want to know, I want to feel safe, I want to know now. So that's interesting to pull apart and tease apart. But that's where the recovery guidance is coming from.
The recovery guidance makes a lot of sense, especially I love the idea of being ready, where you have the ability to hold your truth, and you're looking face to face at your truth, and you're not necessarily taking an action. I feel like that in itself, it's like, I don't know, it's not impulse control, but it's the ability to hold something uncomfortable really forms a person. So I love that. When somebody gets stuck in their step work for too long and they don't get to that part of 8 and 9, I remember the first time I met with Avi's therapist, who was, I believe he was specifically for addiction. I think we were married 2.5 years, and he wanted to meet me. He wanted to see like what was on the other side of this relationship. It was hard to go. And when I left his office, I told him, like, I understand that we're in for a process here. Like, if I choose to stay, or I don't know if I said if I choose to stay, we're here for a process. I'm asking you to focus some of the work that you do on relationships, like on marriage, I know you do a lot of healing work and it's layer by layer and it comes up as it comes up, but can you please focus a little bit on the marriage? Because and he looked at me and he said, yes. I don't know where that ultimately went. I have my feeling of where it went. Avi is very thankful that I encouraged him to leave the therapist that he was seeing, with so much gratitude to him being the first one to hold him and receive him and guide him. There's gratitude and there's I outgrew you, and there's nothing. I was very excited when he moved on. When you're trying to be married, and you stand under a chuppah, a Jewish wedding ceremony, and you declare, in the presence of God and witnesses and your heart and your soul and your inner child and your future generations, that you're committing to this one person, and they will be your exclusive source of masculine energy, and you will be their exclusive source of feminine wonder, and everything that you need from this world and from the upper worlds, you are channeling, and you are willing to excavate into each other's minds, bodies, hearts, and souls. Sacred unity and oneness. Like, we are, the man and the woman are the representation of oneness. Like, there's a feminine soul, there's a masculine soul. God wants to be one. He says that the way that I come, Shechina Shruya Beinehem, and he can flow into this world. We give him the portals to flow into our relationships when there's a sacred unity between a husband and a wife. And you start out and you're ready for this and you're committed and you're giving your heart and your soul and you just want it to be good. And there's a giant leak in the name of sexuality in your marriage, and no matter how much you pour and no matter how much love, and everyone's trying so hard and no one's doing anything wrong. You have your coping mechanism. I have mine. It happens to be yours. Directly affects the safety and the sacredness of what a marriage is. So yeah, I told this therapist, like, focus a little bit on the marriage, because in retrospect, like, we were healing something that was a direct attack to the marriage. But I needed a little safety within my marriage to even build. So that step 8 and 9, it makes sense that it comes where it comes. And maybe we pull from other places, or to bring a little bit more of like honesty, or honesty to the relationship.
Right. And recovery is all about honesty, right? So I don't think the recommendation is not honesty. It's more about the specific process of making amends. But I understand there's other frameworks, and I've been a big supporter of recovery that recognizes the need for other modalities,
Yes.
the need for other perspectives. Like, recovery is one perspective, but none of it is a full religion to the exclusion of everything else.
Right.
For example, recovery has almost nothing to say about trauma. Literally nothing to say about it.
Yes. I know that too well.
Yeah, and oftentimes to deal with it, we need to do something else. You said something interesting that I want to dive in. You
Sure.
said that, I'm paraphrasing, but that you have your coping mechanisms, he has his coping mechanisms, and his happen to be in the arena of sexuality. Okay, so that sounds like an observation that you access through work, not the first day on the job, so to
Right.
speak. So
Right.
can you dive into that?
Sure. I hope. Can I dive in? So the 12 steps doesn't hold a lot of space or acknowledge trauma, right? And maybe our world doesn't either. But maybe that's just, the reading of the religion, it's not a religion, what do you call it? The modality that the 12 steps is, maybe represents most of the world at large, and especially maybe the time period that it was written in. So like that 12-step modality, I actually came into marriage talking a lot about trauma, but I didn't, at first meeting, my first interaction with addiction, with finding out that Avi was struggling, I didn't see it as a trauma response. I didn't have that awareness to see that he had a childhood, and in his childhood, big things came his way. And in the absence of an adult to navigate those big emotions and those existential questions, and the pain of every emotion that a child holds, jealousy, rejection, their wants in life, their aspirations, right? When the child is seen and held through those, they develop. The stages of develop progress. And in the absence of someone being able to co-regulate, like I plug my heart, my cables of my heart are plugged into another adult, and there's this flow of communication of my child is struggling, and so I'm there to hold them with it. You, for the sake of survival, you're going to have to find a way to hold these, to hold yourself while these wars of energy, of these emotions, energy and motion are ripping through you. And in Avi's situation, he pivoted into the world of addiction and the world of porn at that time, and it saved his life. He looks at it as, you were there for me when nobody else was.
The addiction,
The porn,
yes,
the ability to
I see mine the same way.
step into a realm and be, rocket shipped into the land of no worries, no feeling anything other than, something blissful, hopefully, or not. And I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry.
So you're talking about all the emotions that he had to deal with alone,
Right.
and that the addiction itself provided a very useful tool for a time
Right.
to go there.
Yeah. So that was his, with time in my own process and in healing together as a couple, I was able to come to see it as a coping mechanism and not as a direct attack at me. Initially, when I found out about it, it was a direct attack towards my marriage, towards me. You don't find me to be good enough. You don't find me to be on and on and on. But I will say, I went to a Dov Ber Pinson event at the House of Moore, and a man asked Rabbi Pinson a question. I don't know how he phrased the question, but it was a man who had lost a baby. And it was a stillborn child, trigger warning. Sorry, it's coming late. And he was talking about his bitachon in Hashem and in his emunah and how do you move on and how do you process. And I really, really appreciated what Rabbi Pinson said, paraphrasing, which he said, right when something happens to you, you are one with the experience, you're one with the emotions, you feel your anger, you feel your rage, you tell God, why did you do this to me? You had no right to do this to me. You told me to have children, you told me to, procreate in this world, how dare you? And you feel your hopes and your dreams and your connection to this child and your excitement for them to be with you. And it's not the time and the place for your faith in God. It's your time to be with your emotions. A healthy person has an emotional response to something that comes their way. And slowly, as your emotions have processed through your heart, and as you have been loyal and true and you honor your emotion, they subside a little bit. They move a little bit. And then when they're with a little bit of distance, you could have a little bit of, intellectual, value-driven conversations with yourself. The God that I know only does good for me. The God that I know brings souls into this world for specific purposes. And this neshama came in for exactly what it needed to. And I didn't do anything wrong. And there's no blame on me or my wife or life. This was God's work. And you start having those value-driven, bitachon-based conversations with your system, with your inner child, with your heart, with your being. But initially, there's just an emotional reaction. And I would say that was my process with recovery as well. That initially I was extremely reactive to what this means about me. And with time and space, I was able to see it a little bit differently. But I'll also say that, I won't also say, I lost my train.
Okay, so in terms of you having those heavy emotions and feeling the fullness of it, is there anything that Avi did do that helped or hurt? And not to make this so specific about him, but more in terms of that you're going through your experience, right, of these very intense emotions where you're personalizing it. You're saying this must be about me and the way he views me and the way he views the relationship and the marriage. And eventually you're able to create some distance. But before that, when you're living in the intensity of those emotions, is there anything the man can do to make it easier, or is there anything the man does that makes it potentially more difficult?
Avi and I had this conversation last night along these lines, where he says that the message that he has is really a message for women, but he doesn't feel like he has a right to tell this to women. And I say, I have a message for men. I'm kidding. I have a message, hopefully for both. He feels that it was only because I saw it from my soul's perspective that he was able to pull himself out of the grip of the dark energies, klipa, and see it for what it is, and really push and battle shame with the confidence that he needed. He had the clarity of this is not a war against me or her. This is a war against our unity. This is our marriage against this force that doesn't want oneness in God's world.
Right.
This is a war against God. And he says that it was me becoming so clear in that understanding that really fueled, the last years of his fight against it and how to move with it. So my message back to him, my message to men, right? If you're in this battle, if this is where, your soul chose this mission, or God chose you for this mission, or you chose this, it's a battle. And what helped him was my soul's light coming out and telling him, I'm reading the cards, and this is what I read. This is what I see. He needed my vision, which came from my soul. So I come back at him and I said, where was the safety for my soul to come out? We have a war zone going on here. There's energies shooting left, right, center, depending on what the day brings. And a woman's light, her soul, needs a certain amount of sacredness and a certain amount of safety for me to even take it out and read it, or to go into my heart and go into that soul space and get in touch with it, that it could communicate with me. And so I would say that from the man's perspective, if you could really realize that you're one, but her soul has access to realms that are the ticket out of your hell. And even if you are in the middle of a tough battle with addiction, if you can compartmentalize, disassociate, I don't know what the term would be, to ask yourself, what can I do to make this marriage an inch more safe? Because she needs to be able to take her soul out. She needs to be able to read her heart. She needs to be able to go in. And if there's safety, she might be able to do that. The flip side of that is women have to realize they have a soul. They have to realize that they have an neshama inside. I don't think I know we were raised in our community that, yeah, you have a neshama, it comes to you. But I really, Rabbi Shei's Taub has a parenting course. And in the beginning of his parenting course, he asks you to take all of the knowledge that you ever heard about a neshama and to spend, I don't know if it was 10, 15, or 30 minutes to meditate on what does it mean that God put a piece of himself into your child. There's a piece of God in your child. It's all in our head, but if we need to pull the wisdom of what it means to have a piece of God and bring it into our heart. And then when you realize your child has this soul inside, this piece of God, you realize, hey, I have this soul. That's how the child received it. And I think that we were taught from a lot of hardworking warriors, giants in the Rebbe's army, in his mission, and a lot of them were in survival mode. So I don't know how deeply they realize, or maybe this is my own limitation and my own projection, but do you live like you have a piece of God inside of you? Like, with the amount of anxiety and depression and coping mechanisms that are circulating our system, it's very hard to see that we had a healthy awareness or living with, a role-modeled relationship of, I have a piece of God in me, that I have the answers inside of me. I have to create enough safety to go inward. I have to recognize the person in front of me is a piece of God. It's a child of God, is God too. And let's engage with each other like we're all godly beings. So I would say it's like, for the man, like, can you approach your marriage and be a helper to your wife in a way where she's not so overworked and she's not holding the relationship and the child care and the cooking and the cleaning and the schooling and whatever, whatever hats a woman wears. She wears many. And can you access one area where you can grow in your ability to lighten her load so that she can now go into her soul space and really try to connect with the idea that she has a neshama, she has the answers inside of herself.
And what specifically did Avi do in your case to help you bring that soul out? Like, what was it? What were the ingredients of the safety?
I would say, how much time do you have? He did many great things. I will say that if I look back in my journey, the answer to that is that he created enough safety for me to heal from my abuse. I can't say that if I look back at our marriage and I realize that there was enough love and there was enough safety for me to go back to age 3 years old and really collect the parts of myself that were exiled in terror and in, everything that was there. He supported my journey there, and he held space for it, and he honored it. And my therapy appointments that were clockwork, he was there to watch my children. And when cooking was hard for me and I couldn't face the idea of being a giver and creating, he never, ever shamed me for it. It was like, what's for dinner? We're going to do this together. And we love to cook together. He has a very loving heart. He does, and he shows that love to me. I think the fact that we do life together, that we're not here, we really, like early on in our marriage, there was this idea of like, he has to work, he has to make money, I'm home with the kids. And I knew how much we were making. I was very calculated at the time. I knew how much we were spending on groceries, and I like to know things. So we sat down after we were married, and I figured out where our money was going. And when the idea of I can't help you because I'm not available, I have to put in the hours at work, I said, I'm happy to live on this income. I know how to do it. I know how to cook on this income. I know how to pay our rent. We were paying our rent on this income. So from the very early on, we never had this like false God of, I can't have a husband that's present to me in the name of he has to make money. Obviously within a reasonable arrangement. There are work hours that are work hours. Right. But more than that or less than that, I wasn't trading in a deep marriage and a deep love for the name of money. And I think that really put us on a path of we're doing life together. When my baby wouldn't sleep at night, he was there in the morning to give me that hour and a half so that I can show up to my values. My values were so clear to me. I was going to be a calm, present mother. I was going to be a loving, and I didn't deviate in the name of trends and in the name of making money. I put a career. I was on my way to law school. I had a baby. I wasn't leaving this baby. I'm working on leaving her a little. But we really supported each other's values. And I would say that helped a lot.
So this is even while he was in addiction, there was the recognition on his part to give you the space you needed for whatever it was, healing, life.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for a lot. I was asking for once a week, an hour. I would, something else that
you were asking for what you needed.
I had a lot more needs than that. Something that I hear from a lot of women is, and it's something that I go through in myself, there's a pain that comes when someone you love is watching you struggle or suffer, and they're not willing to move out of what their needs are to be able to help you while you're in your suffering or your struggle. So a lot of women will say, including myself, we're heading somewhere, and I told my husband that I need time for myself today, and we're 30 minutes before we're supposed to go, and the whole day I'm waiting for him to come and relieve me of the parental, responsibilities, but he never showed up 30 minutes before, and we have to go now. And I've done this myself, and if I look in the mirror, I think that the feminine energy is having this reckoning with itself, of having boundaries, of knowing our needs and showing up for them in a loving way. Where the last generation, there was this push of martyrdom. They needed to martyr. And there was so few resources. I'm not blaming. I hope I'm not blaming. I have an understanding that there was no extra. There was no boundary. It was just no matter what you gave, I don't think there was enough. Maybe there was. Whereas now, women have to own their needs. I feel like God is asking this of us, the feminine energy, the Shabbos energy, the messianic feminine energy, is saying, do you recognize the value that you bring to this relationship? Do you recognize that without you, you're just walls in a home? Where's the love? Where's the light? Where's the gentleness? Where's the ease? It comes from you. And if you take the steps to know that about yourself and see that in yourself, you'll bring it to life. You're validating it and the process of being able to bring it into this world. I feel like so many of us struggle with that. I don't know, we're along the line of like our self-worth really took a tumble. And it's this whole battle of like, am I worthy of asking my husband to take time out from his work or his prayers or his learning, or like, I could do without.
Right.
I see it in myself, and it's like, it's a real pause. I heard Rabbi YY said something at the end of one of his lectures that he gave. I think someone in the audience asked a question, and it sparked an idea in my head of like, what is true self-confidence? It's how much, or self-worth, like how much of your soul are you tethering and bringing into this world? Your soul is a piece of the upper realms. It's God, and you start having a true self-confidence when, like, in commensurate with how much of your soul you're bringing to the table. So I guess there's like, I don't know how to divide this up: self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. The confidence in your physical abilities to play music, to create food, or whatever it is. That's like your human confidence. And then there's like, how much godliness do I channel? How much godliness do I bring to the table? And I know for myself that
And how would you measure that? How much godliness?
So I'll share a little. Something that came up in my process with Avi was that someone who is healing from addiction, sex addiction, has possibly skipped the steps of courtship. Their process with intimacy is very rushed, and there's a natural buildup that could happen in a healthy relationship. There's this buildup of chemistry, of tension, of passion, courtship, and then ultimately a surrender and a oneness. And somebody this was from a secular CSAT therapist, who she pointed this out, that this is a very common dynamic that happens with somebody who's healing. They don't have the channels or the process of courtship in their repertoire, So at a certain point after Avi and I were, at a certain point in our journey, I remember talking to him about courtship and how I'm craving that. And interestingly, a friend of mine said the same thing to me last week. She's healing from betrayal, not from addiction betrayal, just from her husband betraying her in the relationship in other ways. And I asked her, like, what do you need here? Like, what are you hoping for? What can help you come forward? And she says, I want to be courted. I want him to want me back and to work to show me how much I mean to him. Because in his betrayal, there was a direct attack of what I mean to you, of how much you want me. And a part of the healing can be to show me what I mean to you. For that, maybe for the inner child, maybe, to feel wanted and desired back.
So you jumped on something I said. Okay, I don't want to.
I'm finished. The thought that I'm coming to is, when I was trying to describe to Avi, like, what do I crave in being courted? I laughed at myself, and I was embarrassed to, share this. But I said, like, I want to be treated like Shabbos. I said, I want you to prepare for me. And I was realizing the way we hold space for Shabbos, thank God, in my home, and hopefully in many homes. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not complicated. Like, I know the answer. Like, this is so simple. Look at the way God describes the halachos and the tradition of preparing for Shabbos. We bring our finest. We save up. There's anticipation. From Wednesday, we're preparing for her. We're holding space for her. We sing for her. We pray for her. My ego here is like, how dare you ask for so much? But I want a little bit of all of that, and I think I was able to say that, and eventually, like, first it came out as like this gentle, shy, voice. And eventually I'm like, no, that's really what I want. That's who and I think it's because I feel, thank Hashem, that so much of my soul is in this relationship at this point, and please God, more and more will come through. And so these are my needs, and it just makes so much sense. Shabbos is the feminine energy of
Right.
God. And so, like, we don't have to invent the wheel here. We're just aligning what we're already doing and making links of why were we ever practicing on that arena? Oh, it was to bring it to this arena. And like all of the bitachon work, like I have a friend who reached out to me after she heard the podcast. We went to camp together, and she did a plant medicine journey, and we were voice noting each other, and she said, Lea, like, I am in the depths. Like, I am completely lost. There's no anchors, there's no floors, there's no walls. It's all
She's
gone.
talking about in the middle of the journey?
Right after the journey.
Got it,
right
yes.
after. And she said to me, like, all I have left is my faith. There's no ground beneath me. And I was voice noting her back, and I heard myself say, and I had an awareness, I don't even know if it will come through, I don't know if it makes sense, but like everything that all the faith that you have in this God above, and everything you know about this God, that's you. That's your soul. It's inside of you. It's not so far from you. All of the qualities that you say about Hashem, it's rachamim, it's chin, it's chesed, it's, right? What do we say about God? We're davening. All of those abilities are literally inside of your heart, and it's not so far. And I feel like Hashem, like in the last few years, this movement of bitachon, really showed up to the forefront. For me, it started with my uncle, who had his victory, his Dida Natzach, which is today is Hey Teves.
Oh, cool.
He had his on the 8th day of Hanukkah, 3 days ago. And I relived that experience of reading my phone when he came home, and then going to celebrate with my family. And so he pushed bitachon into our lives. And then I have a good friend, the Felag family, who really pushed bitachon, and Rabbi Taub, and then my husband Avi.
Right.
And I feel like all of this bitachon was the Hashem bringing us, look who you are, look what you have inside of you, look how you're not, it feels like you're trapped, but you're not, because you have infinity. And we have to figure out how to, tap into those resources. I don't know, for me, it's like this mind-blowing idea of like the God that's up there, that's so great, that could do anything, he's actually right here. And the more safety I create and the more I pray, most of my life is praying. I'm always praying. Everything is like, when I'm praying, I'm in my heart space. I pray to be able to pray. Like on a day when I can't feel my heart, I'm like, God, I'm just praying to get in there and just to feel again. Like I'll wake up in the morning and I don't always have access. And I'm like, okay, like it starts, the prayers start, and I'm just trying to get in there. I'm just, so for me, it was like this link. And also on that idea, this is something that I really struggle with, but you say this, that we've been hurt in relationships and we're going to heal in relationships. I tend to be very closed off. I'm scared, I'm unsafe, I'm afraid. That's my lowest vibration. That's what I'd rather be a loner and read and daven and be true to myself without having to face. And over the last few years, Hashem is pushing me, my journey is pushing me to connect with people. And like if I get too closed in, I'll like step back out with a friend that I feel safe with, and I'll start, opening the channels up again. And like, boom, like a glimmer of like a deep godly awareness comes through for me. And I feel like Hashem keeps telling me, Leah, stop closing yourself off from the world. My magic happens through individuals being brave enough to face each other.
Is some of this that, meaning some of the decision to record? You took that?
One of the many.
Yes.
One of the many. I would say the biggest reason for recording this is the last podcast we released, a lot of women reached out, and even from not a lot of women reaching out, my time that I did spend in the 12-step Essanon program, I see what we had to face by ourselves. And if I could show up to the world and create a conversation and hold space for the enormity of the battle that women are facing, and men, then I'm going to be true to the light that I have in my soul and hold it up. Thank you for the opportunity. If it's okay, I would read the letter that I wrote to addiction,
Sure, please.
because I feel like in a very short time I'll honor the journey. It's intense.
So give a little background on the
on the
letter before you just jump in. Yeah.
Sure. So the
What do
background.
you mean by letter to addiction?
So
Where were you when you wrote it? Not physically, but in your mind.
we're going back at least 4 years. Avi was in recovery for a few years at that point. And I was working with a CSAT therapist, and she recommended...
Okay, CSAT, just because you use the term twice. Certified
sex addiction therapist.
Yes.
I didn't work with her for long. And eventually I learned how to trust my own intuition. But when you're starting out on a process, you want to know, like, what do you do when when you're diagnosed with this disease? Where do you go? What do you do? And the people that have been reaching out to me, they're like, where do I start? They want to know, what are the steps you take when you find yourself here? So I was told that you hire a certified sex addiction therapist. Eventually, initially I wasn't open to anybody's. I was in such shock and in such isolation. But the therapist recommended that our work together should be based out of a workbook called Facing Heartbreak. I don't remember the author.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so it's called Facing Heartbreak. It's this big workbook, and it had prompts and questions to help me start unpacking what I was going through.
This was a workbook for both of you or just you?
Just me.
Just you.
And it helped me get to know what I was holding. It helped me get to know what boundaries I needed to take. It made me feel like I have a plan, like I'm not just in quicksand, even though I still felt like I was in quicksand. But if the addict or the recovering individual does this, what would you like your response to be? If he does this, you kind of made your own bottom lines for yourself. And you clarified for yourself, what could I live with, and what's a violation, what's unsafe for my children, what's unsafe for me. And you gave yourself time to go through.
How much of this is communicated to your partner?
None or everything. In my life experience, I don't remember sharing this with Avi.
Got it.
She did recommend a check-in system, like every couple of days, ask each other these 5 questions, get on the same page, which we did for a time, and it was helpful. And then eventually Avi felt a little too controlled. So we had to navigate that of like, are you stepping too much into my zone? Where's this coming from? You know?
Right.
And we had to move with that. But at one point, she really wanted me to write this letter. And it was also around the point where I heard on a talk that you did, encouraging to write a letter to God and to the addiction.
Yes.
And so I wrote a lot of letters. I write a lot. So I wrote this then under that guidance. And when you brought up the idea of holding this podcast and bringing up the topic, this idea flashed into my mind of maybe I should, read this letter. And I go to my closet and I have like 7 journals that I'm pulling on, from the last, couple of years. And the first journal I touch and I open to, it's this letter.
Wow.
So I'm taking it as a sign that I hope to honor and hold space for everybody who is in this path. It's a very big path, and you'll see, I guess, how I feel about it in the letter. So brace yourself. It's intense. Dear sex addiction, you're so powerful it baffles my mind. The amount of resistance I have to look at your place in my life leaves me with a bit of wonder, incredulity. You have
Can I ask you to slow down just a little bit?
Sure.
Yes. You can start again if you could.
Sure.
Just slow it down.
Thank you. Dear sex addiction, you are so powerful it baffles my mind. The amount of resistance I have to look at your place in my life leaves me with a bit of wonder. You have been the catalyst of such wrecking pain and such wondrous growth and metamorphosis. You carry pure evil within you, as well as steroid-grade transformation. You highlight people's greatest, deepest weaknesses, but also their superhuman bravery and desire for a healthy life. You make me want to vomit most days, and I wish you out of this world. You homewrecker, you're the death sentence to so many. Innocent children, innocent men and women don't even know their loved ones were already buried. The walking dead, the definition of gaslit. You erode people's self-worth, concept, intuition. You are the mistress in relationships, but you walk around invisibly. You pretend you aren't taking up space, while you suck all oxygen out of the home. You shatter dreams, you shatter hearts. You bury people. You drain people of their will to live. You drain people of all their resources, their wives' savings accounts. You make people hide from those who are desperate for connection. You foster illusion, betrayal. You create such confusion in the marriage bed. You allow good, kind men to break hearts of sincere, heart-working brides. You hijack the trajectory of marriages. You make raising kids an already impossible task deadly. You rob children of present parents. You rob children of safety, calm, and peace. You rob innocence. You create such intense medical issues. You make people feel so painfully and desperately alone. You limit where people can go, live, and play. You make it so that we can never let our guards down. You isolate and take people away from their friends. You ensnare people in shame like a nasty spider web. You make us so hyper-aware of our bodies and beauty only to tell us we don't make the cut. You tell us to dress up and work it, but drive us into pajamas and neglect. You turn women against women, neighbors against each other. Weariness comes into all interactions, another thing to scan for. You cause people to be so misunderstood and stay in that uncomfortable place. You cause hate towards parents. You make me not want to go out into the world as a family for fear of being triggered. You made me feel so unworthy because you turned my husband into a self-centered, inconsiderate person. Almost done.
No rush.
Dear sex addiction, I know that you are a catalyst for a lot of healing, uncovering, cleansing, and even for creating a better, safer world. I have no doubt that people impacted by you have done great work. It seems like you are a split personality, half evil, half good. While I see and acknowledge your goodness, I still wish you would get the F away from me and my family. There's a part of me that feels like we would have grown up from something else. You are so unstable, so dangerous that I'm not ready to thank you for your place in my existence. You are very powerful and have even helped me realize my own power. So now that we are here, hear me. I'll make for a fierce opponent. You will not be left to enjoy my family's carcasses. I know you now, and I'll be on guard. Bury yourself somewhere. Please plead with God that your mission on this earth sucks and that you want out. That's it.
Beautiful.
When I read this letter, I flipped to the page before to see, like, where was I when I wrote this? And over here I write that it's Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, that I'm at a coffee shop and that I'm sensing a lot of resistance to write this letter. I've been putting it off, and the therapist says, "Are we doing this today? Did you write the letter?" And I tell myself, I'm going to do something very emotionally unstable. And like I watched how, in retrospect, I was creating safety, the walls that I talk about, the masculine of like, where's the safety to be able to take out your light? So that's what I do. And I remind myself of how precious I am and how safe I am and what my values and my beliefs are, because before I let myself feel such intense emotion, I might get lost in it. I might not come out. I might be taken in, and I don't know where this is going to end up. So I had such a deep gratitude to the person that I was, who was able to figure out how to give myself the ability to tap into my heart at a time when it wasn't coming from other places. Like, these are the walls. This is your truth. These are your godly values. And now we're going to surrender. We're going to go see what your heart has to say about this. And if you can't find your footing after your heart's journey, you're going to turn the page. You're going to come back here, and I'm going to remind you of everything that you stand for, and I'm going to help you find footing again. So it was a beautiful experience for me to be able to look back and see my process, because I didn't see it in real time as it was happening.
What one of the things I noticed there was in the letter is it felt like a switch in consciousness at some point, where it started with, hey, here's all the ways you've ruined my life as a result of what you've done to my husband. But then in the resolution of the letter, there was like, you're going to take on the sex addiction.
Yeah.
Right, which was, did you notice that switch in there?
Hear me. Yeah.
What?
When I say hear me,
Yes.
I'll make for a fierce opponent. I stand up to this mission. My husband's not at it alone anymore.
Right. Where up until then it felt like the addiction is wrecking your husband, so what can you do about it?
Yeah.
And then it's like, no,
and then I show up. And then the woman shows up to the journey, and it's a different battle.
Right. I don't know. I think my wife once said this to someone else, and I overheard it. It could have been someone else, could have been something you said. I'm not sure. But is that, I'm 99% sure I heard my wife say it to someone else, is that she didn't see it as me fighting the addiction, but as us, like collectively, my wife and I fighting the addiction. For some reason, I feel like I heard it in that way, but at this point in time, I could have heard it in a few different settings, but it felt like that also in there, where the transition was, hey, this is my problem too.
Right. I think that when the storyline of addiction, right? There's a general narrative, the players that, show up. And they tap at different parts of your heart, or, they start tapping. And whatever story or exile you hold on that part becomes activated. So if I was struggling with worthiness, and now my husband's the storyline is that you're not enough, my prior history on that part of my heart comes flinging in, and it becomes this entangled experience of the addiction versus my lifetime's journey, or lifetimes, it becomes this entangled reality, and I don't even know what's addiction and what's my past. And slowly, through navigating it and through being committed to healing, a woman gets to really look at every part of her heart. I feel like addiction and betrayal, if you're not downplaying it, that's one of the things women do. They downplay it, and they say it's not a big deal. Most marriages in the secular world have these components to them, and it's not. And in my opinion, if I could say, I feel like they're trying to downplay a situation in the hope of feeling safer and not being true,
or in the hope of not feeling the pain.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm saying that the first, maybe like this man who lost his baby, Bir Rishon, the first round is this entanglement, everything comes up. And when you slowly start facing and showing up to what God wants you to heal in a day, God, what are we doing today? What's going to come our way? And eventually you get to heal the deepest parts of yourself, because you need the deepest parts of yourself to heal this. You really need, it's not really that you need the deepest parts of yourself. It's that the way I could see now, like I did a breath work a few weeks ago, and I saw myself like from a bird's eye. And I saw that the times in my life that I was crying my hardest, God was a veil away on the other side. And I didn't know. Like I didn't only now.
You said a veil away?
A veil away. He was behind a curtain. He was
Okay.
right there. He was like, there was, I don't know, in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, there's this parochas, this curtain that separates. And I was like, that's what it felt like. That's what the visual was like. You're so deeply in your heart space, and you're so deeply feeling this energy and allowing me to pierce through you. You're taking me in, God, in so deeply. Really, I was taking my pain in, and there's God. So I feel like this journey really asks you or gives you this push to go so deeply inside of yourself for your own wounds that you're showing up with. And then eventually, or you do this dual dance between my story, the marriage story, my story, the marriage story, which meaning this addiction, the battle that this marriage is facing.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the addiction is going to highlight what's inside. There's the marriage component of it, of course, right?
Yeah.
What highlights within the marriage. But then someone's individual reaction to their partner's betrayal, the knowledge of the addiction, is going to highlight all these things inside of them that were pre-existing, so to speak.
Yeah. And maybe that's my story. I know I have an intense trauma story before I showed up to marriage. But so that's how I see it. In reality, if I try to take myself out, I think that you're still going to end up with a lot of the same variables that you're working with, because the concept of marriage and the betrayal of marriage brings out these deep shame, self-worth, lack of safety, lack of boundaries, insecurities around beauty, like any concept that a woman struggles to be with outside of your own personal trauma. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the feeling that it feels to me that you're trying to inspire in someone listening to this.
Sure.
And it feels like you keep returning to this self-worth, really valuing oneself.
Okay.
And am I accurate there?
I would say so. Like, just keep
Right.
talking.
Yeah, meaning like a woman who's about to embark on this journey of really it's like evolving truth being exposed, right? Because anyone I know who's gone through this journey has never gotten like the one dose and that's it. Like, here's a story of what's going on in your marriage. Your husband struggling with porn. It's no, there's that. And then it feels like, okay, I can handle that. And then you find out a little more truth.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And then there's more
Yeah.
and more. So someone who's about to embark on this journey or has already started, right? And somewhere in that journey, which likely has more and more of this truth that's going to come to the surface, the message from you is to really, really, really value yourself, value your soul, value your wisdom, value your intuition, value your heart.
I would say before that, it's to value your pain, to really honor your emotions. You're not making anything up. I feel like for myself and so many women, they feel like, am I crazy? I don't know how many times I've asked myself, am I going crazy? Am I going crazy?
What did you mean by that?
That do I have a defective heart that's generating these alien emotions, these warped realities? My heart's responding to life in an improper way, with the actual way that life is unfolding. Like somehow my system doesn't respond or produce in a way that makes sense. I don't know why we have that notion that things are supposed to make sense or that there's a certain way of being, but I feel so angry. Am I crazy? I feel so depressed. What's wrong with me? I feel, right, these women.
Okay, I first heard it as like making up things. You're not saying that.
That too. Am I making, if I feel rage or sadness or anger, but there's nothing to be sad about. So am I making this up? And there are women who are doubting their response to life, their emotional response to life, or their mental response to life. But I think that this addiction is very, it has so many layers to it. You have the bigger energies that bring things out. And then you have the more subtle energies. And your heart is producing an emotional response to a lot of invisible layers here. And you're not going crazy. And I feel like for me, the breakthrough happened when I stopped being at war with my heart and at war with my feelings. I feel like going through the system that I went through, this Chabad belief or gift of Mayach Shalat al Halev, your mind will control your heart. Control. Mm-hmm. That's how it was taught, versus your mind has the ability to influence your heart, which is actually the Hayom Yom of my birthday, of how you can meditate and use Chabad Chassidus concepts and generate an emotional response on your heart so that you can really be one in your...
So it causes an expansion of the emotions, not a suppression of
exactly. And it allows you...
That's a pretty big deal. Meaning the distortion is a pretty big deal, because our understanding was exactly the opposite of that.
You resonate with that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've spoken about it here a number of times.
Okay.
Is that the message, subtle, not so subtle, overt, covert, was the mind suppresses the emotions, like keep your emotions in check, don't trust your emotions.
Right.
And here you're saying that the actual intention of it is the opposite, that our mind is meant to expand
our heart.
Our heart, yes.
Exactly. And I feel like this came up for me in so many medicine journeys where like my heart and my mind were at war. There was literally a war going on. There was guns involved. Like there was such an intense reality for me of like, can I trust my heart? Can I trust my mind? Can I, these two powers, these two godly forces in me, and they're both fighting. And today I sit with the idea of we have multiple powers and we're all supposed to work together, and one doesn't control the other. And one power recognizes that today in this situation, you're supposed to guide me, and tomorrow you're supposed to guide me. And there's this communication between the parts of like, who's best for this moment. But there's this harmony between my body, my soul, my heart, and my mind of who is supposed to be who do we take lead from here in this situation? So coming back to this, I feel like I very much resonate, and I see this with a lot of women. They really feel crazy. I'm going crazy. And I could understand, your husband, let's say, in a healthy amount of transparency, is acknowledging, I struggle when I see a woman in this way. I struggle when a woman is provocative in this way. But there's so much more. There's so much more that's going on that's unspoken for.
By the way, I just want to say something there. Many don't share it as a struggle. Right? Many share it. So some women's experience of it is a man will actually say, I like women with darker hair or lighter hair or bigger lips or whatever, right? Meaning it's not always shared as a struggle. Somewhere it's
identity. It's them.
Some women's experience of it is just, it's shared as you're not good enough, that person is.
Right.
And I just wanted to acknowledge.
And I think that goes back to coaching men on how to give over information, where you or maybe not, you follow what I'm saying, that a man doesn't have to impose on his wife that you don't make the cut because I'm into something else.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking from an addiction standpoint.
Okay.
I'm talking just a guy who says, hey, this is what I'm into.
My truth would be that you're struggling with it. A person is struggling with it.
Right. I'm saying, but it's not shared as a struggle. There's a big difference in reality where a husband says to his wife, I really struggle, right? Anytime I see, I don't know, women in short skirts. Right. Okay. And my head goes crazy. So maybe I shouldn't be around it, or maybe I need a little support, whatever it is. Versus, hey, I wish you dressed that way.
Right.
Or, hey, I like taller women, right? Meaning, so for some women experience it not as a man sharing a struggle, but a man sharing it directly as, this is what I like. I just wanted to acknowledge them because I actually heard an example mean, literally yesterday, of someone sharing that he enjoys more. He told his wife he prefers more full-breasted women, and he's looking at different natural ways to address that. And he's not identifying as an addict. He's like, none of that experience is coming through. He's not just saying he likes
Right.
porn. It's just, I just wanted to acknowledge that reality that exists.
What do you think about a man that, what comes to you when you hear a man say that?
They got no tact. So
What, I'm going to push you. I'm
on
gonna
that,
push
what
you.
do I
What
share?
else comes? No, what do you share with the person? What comes up for you as a man hearing another man have a process that sounds like that? What comes up is, as a full spectrum? We could spend a lot of time here.
I think that there's definitely a selfishness or a self-centeredness associated with it. But if I go further, I think that right now, I'm thinking of a specific situation of a friend of mine I know, couple of kids, beautiful wife, potential for a beautiful family, and he seems to be willing to give it all away just because he wants more sex. And in his mind, it has nothing to do. His wife is objectively beautiful, and he finds her beautiful. And he says it, he just feels that men are not meant to be with one woman. We're not wired that way. We're not meant to be. We're not. And in the pursuit of that perfect sexual life, whatever he imagines, he's, in my mind, losing everything, like giving everything away. So I think it's an irrelevant, like, to me, it's like an irrelevant data point. The nature of man is men desire novelty, right? It's just one of the things that exists. It's one of the things that exists. There are ways to deal with that, right? There's a writer, Marcel Proust, he says the journey of life is to find the new in the old, right? To see old voyages with new eyes, something like that, right? And there's a way to bring that novelty within a relationship.
Yeah.
But many of the things exist. The guy is not sharing anything new when he's saying that piece of information. It's the nature of man to desire novelty. At the same point in time, like I said earlier, there's no tact. It also lessens the beauty of the person in front of you, in your eyes and their eyes, right? The feeling is
Explain that. It lessens whose beauty?
it brings someone down a notch when you say that, right? It's not bringing them up, it's bringing them down.
If a person would say that about themselves, you would view them to be less than?
If a
or the
person
woman.
would say that about the other person, they're sucking something out of them.
Yes.
Yeah, they're sucking an
Yeah.
energy out of them.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've shared about women, men look pretty much the same, always.
Right.
Okay? You wake up a guy
And he's
after
ready.
10 hours sleep, he looks pretty much as good as he does on his wedding day.
Right.
Okay? Like the range is very small. You put him in a tuxedo, you brush his hair, you this. We don't get that much better looking, and we don't get that much, like we kind of look the same. And women have a very wide range for whatever reason, right? Like a tremendous, tremendous range of beauty that exists there. And I think that the husband, the man, can bring that out. I did a short podcast once.
Your wife is only
Your
as
wife-
beautiful as
As you make her feel.
I listened to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some way, the man is like sucking some of that out of sucking some of the beauty out of the system by saying it. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
You did. I didn't see the podcast going in this direction, but I'll take it as a godly
Yes.
flow, and I'll push myself to share if my brain will let me, or my heart.
Okay.
Last night, Avi and I were driving together, and he said something like, "I love you," and I said, like, "Where's it coming from? Like, what's it connected to?" I'm like, "Take me deeper. Like, take me deeper. Where is that rooted in you? Like, where?" And it took a minute, and he said, I'm going to put a disclaimer that I'm sharing this in response to the idea of men or human beings desire novelty. And this is my rebuttal to that, or my heart's or soul's response to that. And I can sound naive, and maybe before I say this story, I'll say that in my journey, I felt so angry at Rabbanim and Halacha. And I want to go there after this story. I want to talk about that for a minute. My relationship with Rabbanim and Halacha and leadership, because it came up very strongly last week. Also, if my system will let. And I spent days upon days upon days feeling like my husband desires something and I'm not allowed to give that to him in public. If I want to be true to my values, I cannot give him that. A random stranger has the ability to do that for my husband, my man, but I'm not allowed to do that. Now
Do what?
Inspire his sexual appetite out on the streets, because I hold myself to a certain standard of halacha or of what felt safe. At that point in time, I can't say that it was coming from halacha. It was coming from my essence. My essence my heart would not allow me to show up in certain environments that were outside of my space, looking a certain way, and I would get like enraged. Like I would go out on the street and I'm like, you get to do that and I don't? None of this makes any sense. I'm just sharing with you my process.
Yes.
And I think it was very helpful to allow myself to explore and experiment and to try to move as close to my values as possible, but not keep myself, like there was a period where I'm like, I was immobilized with that emotion. And then I had a phase where I'm like, okay, let's work with this. Let's work. How much could I change? What could I do? What can I? And I gave myself space to paint, okay, on a canvas. Eventually now in my journey, I've apologized to myself for those experiences and for putting myself, for taking myself farther away from my truth in those pursuits of maybe I can be the man, maybe I can give my husband what I think he's into, right? That might not fit so factually within my objective, cards. And so for today, I could say that I'm proud of myself for trying. I'm proud of myself for exploring and experimenting. And I also am back to a standard of being very true to myself. This is my hair color. This is my heart color. And I feel like my deepest truth, I'm married. Thank God. Thank you, Hashem. I'm married to my soulmate. We're both deeply in love with each other's souls. And we only want soul truth. That's our objective and the more you can see, like God doesn't make mistakes. He does I feel like my life's journey, and especially like since plant medicine, has truly highlighted the leaf doesn't fall on the floor without God ordaining it to fall on the left angle at 90 degrees with the yellow side showing, and then to move on 4 seconds later in the wind. So your lip size and your shoe size and your every size that you are is perfectly aligned with the soul's story that you've been on. And I did spend time really hating parts of myself. And I have spent days trying to do teshuvah to those body parts and saying how did I ever not give you love? How did I ever think that you were anything less than perfect? You have a story, you've been the source of so much strength and nurture and love. You were always perfect. It was the filters that I was seeing you through that skewed my vision and my version of you. I've really had to do a real number of I am so sorry that I ever thought maybe a nose job, maybe it's coming from my heart. It's not, I feel that it is. So that's my rebuttal or my understanding of this person. I'll go back. What did Avi tell me? Why do I love you? This is last night. He said I'm never bored. I'm never bored. You're always going deeper into your heart. And you're always bringing another layer of soul. And it's just today is a first day for me. What do we have here? And I heard in his voice, this novelty that you crave, this infinite what is more infinite than infinite? What is more novel than every day could be another life,
Yes.
another story? And so when you bring your heart and your soul to the table, it's literally where the places that God has taken us, the journey that's unfolding. It's like living a wild dream. It really is. Sometimes I'm like, where are we? Like, let me ground myself. As I'm talking, I was thinking of like this idea of tshuva that I wanted to bring out, and about leadership. I don't know where you want to go, if you want to respond or...
I do want to respond
Sure.
a little bit. So on the novelty piece, I'm not sure how you heard it, but I didn't mean that a woman should cater to that in a very physical way. I didn't at all. I meant to say is that...
I didn't think you were saying
Right. It's
that.
actually quite the opposite, right?
Yeah.
That there's a part of men that want that. And then as soon as they get that, then they want the next, right? So it's not to take it so personal. It's just for whatever reason, there's something ingrained in us that today seeks that and tomorrow seeks that, right?
I
At the
see it
same point in time.
deeper.
But now, right, what you're talking about is like that spiritual component of
Yes.
it. And it's actually much more novel, right? That was a quote I was mentioning, Marsh Proust. It's much more novel to find something you saw yesterday and find something new inside it. And to find novelty within that, that's true novelty.
Yeah.
So that in some ways we turn on its head. One of the things that I've shared, I may have shared in this podcast, sometimes I'm not sure because some of my conversations kind of mix, is that, like, let's say like the world of fantasy, right? Which for many of us, for myself, it scared me terribly, right? Especially as related to addiction. I can't go there. I can't think about it. I fought it and resisted it. And over time, for myself, my wife, for others, like just sharing that concept, is that there's always something in there that's quite beautiful if we can strip it away from everything else. So meaning if I'm coming with a framework of, I really like the way you said it before, that all of the feminine I'm going to get from my wife, all of the masculine, like everything I'm looking for in the energy, all the feminine energy I'm looking for in the world, I'm going to get that from my wife.
Right.
So now there's this thought buzzing in my head. So if I say, okay, whatever that thought that's buzzing in my head, right? I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to, like, what am I pulling at?
Right.
And what's there, right? Behind the physical trappings of whatever it is. What am I looking behind it? What am I actually looking for? And then to turn that back and say, okay, that's a desire that I now have in my relationship. And I'll give you an example of this. I remember speaking to someone, a woman who was dealing with like somewhat of a fantasy towards, like not upset, like an obsession towards someone else. Okay. And just asked me what I thought about it in a conversation. It's like, what does it represent? What does this man represent? And like the feeling was some sort of fun, right? That there's some lightness around this person. And in their marriage, which was a good marriage, right, there was an intensity, right? So if you pull that back and say, okay, I'm looking for fun within my relationship. Of course, no, like to go there, like for example, like this, I know the couple who shared this point. I know the guy and the woman who shared the point of, I like more full-breasted women, right? So he's not looking for that. He doesn't want to wreck his family. He doesn't want to hurt his wife. He's not actually looking for what's on the other end. But if he pulled at it and said, like, what does it actually represent? What's the feeling I think I would get from that? And then bring that back home. There's actually something that could be pulled back away from it. So if there's a desire that's suddenly emerging to say, okay, I want more fun in my relationship, then say, okay, that can totally be created within your existing relationship. If that can be shared in a way that's not, it doesn't need any of the extra components. Like once someone does their work and come back home and say, hey, how can we introduce more fun into our relationship? And that can be totally novel, right? All of a sudden we're experiencing someone in a completely different way than we ever have. And that itself could bring about the desire that we have. Anyway, hope that answered the...
Yeah, for sure. It's helpful because I feel like my response might give people the impression that I think that we should suppress these desires that come up, these crass or vulgar or truthful, it depends which, where you're hearing it from. I think that a man who's brave enough to admit to that feeling, but then has the the depth or like the evolvement within his process to like, okay, like let me unpack this. What is it that I am picking up on in this?
Yes.
And I find like, the deepest things that we want and the things that have the potential to give us the most in life are usually hidden in these like these desires that we would shun, or that I'm not allowed to get to know that part of myself.
Right.
I'm not. And so to be honest with your desires, but like you said, in a way where you hold them and you start stripping them of their outer packaging to come into
Yes.
the core energy. And that might be done, as an internal process, or not necessarily with your spouse.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like for myself, again, you may see it differently, is that process should be done internally. And then from what's left after that,
Right.
to bring to bring that back to the marriage
beautiful.
can work. But in middle of that process, it could be very threatening and it could be very scary
Right.
for someone to introduce us.
I think that very often when we share a desire or we share a part like this, it could come across as, this is my truth, this is what I want, this is my ultimate, right? And we're like one with the desire, we're one with the addiction or the entanglement, whoever the person is. I was talking to Avi and I was saying how, really it started out with a friend of mine, and she was saying how her husband really hurt her. And now their marriage, a few months later, thank God, is well. So I said, like, how's he doing? How are you? And she said, we're safe, but he feels so bad about what he did to me that he's like in a bit of a depression. And it really, it brought up a lot for me in terms of what I thought tshuva and healing looks like and what it actually looks like. So I had this conversation with Avi. I don't get to do as much, in-depth learning as he does. And he has been recently learning not Gates of Unity, that too, but the part of the Tanya where the Alter Rebbe talks about tshuva. And so he has his own process with it.
Geras Tshuva?
Yes, thank you. Geras Tshuva. And he's going through that. And so if I'm saying it correctly and in my own experience, like, we could go through something and we could feel that we missed the mark, that we were untrue to ourselves. And when we finally have that reckoning of like, I no longer want to be untrue to myself, I recognize how far I've come from my marriage, from myself, from my God, from my children. I want to come back to my truth. I want to come back to what alignment would look like here. But in my own process, it's like I realize the gap between who I am and who I have been holding myself as, acting, and then being pulled so quickly into the dark, into guilt, into shame, into very low vibrations, thinking like that's the process of healing. Like that's how you do teshuvah. You feel bad and you're hard on yourself. And it's not that you're doing this consciously. This is how this is how my system is wired. I have this recognition of I could be doing it like this, like I could be mothering and treating my children like this. Oh my God, a hard day is really a day to give so much love. That's that's what's happening today. Why didn't I know that before now? And now I can come shame myself for why didn't I know that? That's so basic, right? And I can fall for the trap. And when I try to see it, like this is journeys of work has brought me to this idea of tshuva is in the light. We don't go into the dark. If we deeply care about what we did, the battle continues to stay in the light. If I care that I hurt my wife or that I hurt my child and I was that far off from holiness or where we could be, then I need to keep myself from falling into the dark side in a charade of I'm healing now. And what would true healing look like? It would look like compassion. It would look like, I am so sorry that I never knew something so basic and that you have been working so far from your truth and you're compensating because you're so far from your truth and you're so tired because you didn't know this. And I have so much compassion on my soul that it had to live in false garments and try so desperately to like, what's not going well here? You have to live with this confusion and this uncertainty. And the process of tshuva is this deep compassion for this part of your experience and staying in a loving place with it. I don't know why this comes up right now, but that's what was coming to me. Maybe with these desires, maybe I was seeing it off of like when you desire something so far from your truth.
Right, not to fight it so aggressively.
No.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of the counterintuitive parts, certainly, of healing addiction is like the harder we are on ourselves, the more likely we are to fall. So it's finding some sort of balance between extreme gentleness, but also holding ourselves to a standard. Yeah. So not so gentle that anything goes, but so gentle that we don't go into guilt, shame, despair, remorse.
Yeah, I think that as a wife, after you've been very hurt, you kind of like want a certain like energy of like, we're going to eradicate this from our lives. And like when the spouse goes into this like tough or dark place, it could feel like, oh, this intense energy is here and it's going to get it out of my life and it's going to move it. So you are craving a reaction for the amount of pain you're holding. You want to know that there's a big energy here that's going to help, that's going to change things. And I think that the more we get in touch with feminine energy, godly energy, the more we realize that the big energy is the loving energy.
Right. You're reminding me of, I think the first time my wife found out about some of the behaviors that really hurt her. Right. Like I said, everyone has their version of what is and isn't betrayal, cheating, etc. And we were in person. I had shared something. I wasn't completely truthful. She questioned me on it. Slowly more and more truth came out. And I saw her face, which just looked like shattered glass. And I was like, wow, I don't want to hurt another person this much. And there was something that shifted after that conversation that, hey, I have to take this seriously. But one of the things I was left with was I didn't believe that I can hurt another person this much before this conversation. I didn't think she cared. I thought there was some other reasons we were in a relationship. We weren't dating. We weren't married. I thought there were some other external reasons we were in a relationship, and it was pleasant and nice, and there were good components to it. I didn't believe in myself enough to think that someone cared enough about me or our relationship that I can hurt them that much. And actually, I was left in a weird way. That experience kind of built something inside me, like a confidence, and said, "Oh wow, I could have an impact like that on another human being." So when you're talking about it, I was thinking of that's what it brought me to. Is the same set of facts can bring us to deep despair, or in that case, brought me to a deep conviction of a belief in myself and that I want to do better.
Yeah, you matter.
Right. It's interesting the way that that works. So when I asked you earlier and I said you seem to want to give women the feeling that of a lot of value and to truly trust themselves and intuition, you right away said yes, but also their pain. What did you hear I was saying differently than that?
I think that the way I came to know my value and the way that I came to know to have a confidence was only through the process of honoring my pain. Honoring that if God allowed for these events, this domino effect of events, to create this amount of pain in my heart or in my body, and if I'm going to let this pain and this reality, I'm not going to gaslight myself, I'm not going to distract myself and go shop, and I'm not going to hide behind my children. I'm going to feel what God sent my way. I'm going to let it in to my human experience, and I'm going to let it rip through my heart. Hopefully not rip, hopefully move through my heart. In the process of that energy, that godly dark energy moving through my vessel, it awoke in me. I gave birth to this confidence. I came to this knowing. I came to this intuition and this clarity. Like if I look back, how did I get from there to there? How did we go from, I think we're getting divorced, to it's me and you against this addiction?
Right.
Like I know I wrote that letter in 2021, but it took years, like until the showdown came, happened, and probably will continue in its own version to happen. Please God, no, but yes, So I look back and I realized, like, the times when an overwhelming amount of pain and chaos and confusion was knocking at me, and it was even too big to ignore. It wasn't even an option of distracting myself at that point, and I let it all in, right? And I didn't know if I was going to come out on the other side. I didn't know what would happen. It was such intense volume. And I let it move and move and move. And I found myself saying, like, I'm in a dungeon. I'm in a pit in the ground. Like, if I'm in the dark, Yosef Hatzadik was here. It has to be that he's here with me. And I insisted. I'm like, I'm not here alone. God is with me and Yosef. I know you have to be here. I know you're hiding. Like, through the process of feeling, my emotions took me to extremely dark places, feeling them, the intensity of them. And then I look back and my next move was, whatever it was. Like, how did I go from having that strength? Like, there was a very strong move that between 10 minutes and, in the next 10 minutes. And it came, if I'm seeing my story correctly, and again, there's so many of the same story happening, it was allowing the deep emotions to move me and to feel my anger and to feel my sadness and to feel my betrayal and to feel my confusion and work with the energies that God was sending me and know that there's nothing wrong with it, that literally the Rebbe Rashab's Maimer of Viadaita is the dark is the light. Elokim is Havaya. And the more you look at Elokim and you say, I know there's Havaya in there, reveal yourself to me. I don't accept this. I am worthy of the light. And you push and you force the light, you pull it through. And I feel like those energies made my vessel. It made me have access, or at least it gave me the awareness. Maybe the vessel was there, but it showed me the strength of my heart, the capacity of my heart. And in that channel, I feel like God hides divine energy in our emotions. And the more we could honor them and move through them, we come through at the end with this clarity, with this godly. Now a next step emerges. I had this process where I'm like, are my emotions my truth? Are they? And from what I understand today, if I let an emotion travel my heart, let's say 14 seconds, like, I let you in and you're on my heart for 14 minutes and then 14 seconds and then I jump out. That's it. I'm done. I'm not really yet at my truth. I'm not yet at, like, oh, this is what God wants from me. Like, there was an energy in here and there is a clarity that I'm taking away from it. And it's only through, like, really, really honoring an emotion to the end and coming to the emotion and, like, saying, like, do you feel seen? Do you feel like I held you? And if I come to the end and I've held it and I've held space for it, that I know, like, this is the closest point of divine guidance that I'm going to have. I'm breaking up a process. I'm intellectualizing and giving language to something that happens in me. I'm not this thought out.
So there's actually a process that describes this exactly. It's called I don't know if you notice with your hand, you were doing this.
Yeah.
You're drawing. So they call it the U theory.
Okay.
There's a guy, Adam Young, who talks about it. My wife and I did some work with a relationship therapist named Haiti Schleifer, which takes people through exactly the process. And the U theory is essentially, Adam Young actually has a 3-part podcast, which his podcast is called The Place We Find Ourselves.
Okay.
But the name of this podcast is How Healing Happens. It's a 3-part podcast, How Healing Happens. And he talks about the U theory. He happens to be Christian, so he uses a lot of Christian ideas and language in order to make his point.
Right.
But for those triggered by that, if that's stripped away, it's brilliant in the way he articulates and explains the process. But I'll go actually to the way Haiti Schleifer did it with my wife and I. So what she refers to it as, like, taking someone into your dark neighborhood, right? So in the couple interaction, she'll have one person be the host and the other person be the visitor. And so, okay, like, be the host and the host doesn't really know where they're going, right? I just know that this triggers me about in our relationship. I
Right.
get really, really, this is our fight, this is our thing, and you know, so I may bring someone in. So she says, okay, so be the host, and the visitor is going to come, and the visitor actually helps you to be able to see those darkest parts of yourself. In some way, you can do the work yourself, like you described, but what she calls it is that when we hit the bottom of the U, that then the future calls.
Wow.
And she showed it to us through the process that we did. We did 2 full days with her, several years apart. And as she takes people through the process, she'll say at that point of the deepest pain, when it's articulated in some way, that there's a simple expression that captures the enormity of the pain of whatever any of our experiences were. And it seems to kind of go, further and further down. Oh, you betrayed me and you left me, and I was completely unwanted,
Right.
and I didn't want to live, or whatever. There's some true enormity of the pain, and even when I told you I didn't want to live, right, you still eyes were dead, right? And maybe that's the enormity of the pain, just to be able to express that even when I said it to you, you still had the same blank face. And that the moment that's fully felt, then the future calls. And after that moment, and she pointed out to us multiple times, that suddenly there's this positive expression that seems to emerge from almost out of nowhere. It's like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? I was just taking someone into the enormity of the pain, and then it can sound like something like, and that's why I love you so much, right? And like,
Wow.
where did that come from? How did that emerge? And that's what she calls it. The future is calling as soon as we're willing to go to descend into the you. The way Adam Young says it is like, if we want to go from here to there, point A to point B, we don't get to like kind of skip over and like make a straight line through the 2 tops of the U. It's like we have to descend into the darkness and then emerge on the
Right.
other side. So actually what you're describing is a recognized and formulaic healing process that someone can look up. Like you stumbled on something that others have for sure.
What comes to me when you're talking is the idea that this happened, organically in my own process. Maybe at some point there was some reading material years back that came to this. But more recently, it's been my Marim and Hasidic guidance to help me in my process. And I recently heard that there was a person in a leadership position who was talking against healing and talking against modalities and there's new methods and treatments coming to the light. And I didn't go looking for this information. Someone told me that someone told them this. And so
1 second, you didn't go looking for the information that...
I don't go online. I don't go looking for
Yes.
my triggers. It came to me. So when I found myself in my day, all of a sudden there was an anger or a sadness and an anger. Like a half hour after I heard this, I noticed a sadness and an anger on my heart.
Did you read the article?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. And
It came my way also.
I
I was playing with the idea of bringing it up. Now you brought it up, so good.
Okay.
Yes.
So maybe it's meant to be. And me and Avi and the kids were spending our Hanukkah together, and I noticed this pain on my heart, this emotion. And I drop in, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this? Like, what is this? And I realize it's extreme sadness. And I go in, and I'm feeling the sadness out, and as best as I could articulate it, I'll try to share that I grew up hearing that everything that you need to heal comes from Torah, from clean Torah sources. And I was in enormous amount of pain, and I was believing of the older adults in my life, mostly aunts and uncles, not my parents. For some reason, my aunts and uncles' voices were louder to me than my parents' voices. I'm not sure why, but I'm not going to psychoanalyze that today. Thank God it's very, very different now, and I'm very grateful for the relationships I have with my parents and the honesty that I can go to them with and be held by them. And they very much pushed this religious Hasidic belief that like everything you need, you find in Torah. And it eventually in my healing, I started out with Louise Hay, At a certain point, it turned into Nicola Pera. At a certain point, the Brene Brown was a big feature in my life. Like, I moved from, self-help book that was, up. And my journey with all of this is that those healing modalities or books or guides got me to a certain point, and they were there for me when other things were not there for me. And they gave me a sense of, we're moving this. Life's going to get better. They inspired a certain hope of, we know what pain is, and we're going to we recognize pain, and we wrote a book about pain to help you with your pain.
Yes.
And then at a certain point of me, like, insisting, like, where's the healing? Where's the healing in Torah? Like, this belief in me of, like, I'm not going to give up on you. You actually very much helped me, like, be true to this belief when you hosted Divi Bogart on your podcast, and I heard you talking to Divi and Rabbi Jacobson, I think, Simon was on, or around that time, like that conversation gave me this renewed conviction of, like, the deep healing you can have from Hasidus. Like, it really woke up so much in me. I was very emotional around it. But then, moving on years later, I come to this mimer Rabbi YY did on Kayin Balmum from the Tzemach Tzedek, and that took my healing to a totally different place. Like, I think until then I was probably healing my animal consciousness and my wounds, and then that gave me the safety of, like, you're a soul and we've seen you before, we know what to do with you, so you could admit to take your soul out. We know which procedures are going to have to happen now. Like, we know what a soul goes through. And so much came from that. So today I hold the understanding or the confidence that all healing is in Torah. The deepest healing is in Torah. But I wanna answer to that person or people that criticize healing. You guys are the biggest guards to sacred healing. Because if you truly believe that all healing can come from Torah, show me a kollel, show me a yeshiva, show me an organization, show me women that are sitting and learning, and they say, we know what goes on in a Jewish home. We know what goes on in an Orthodox home. They struggle with, I could start now, I won't stop, eating disorders, a lack of parnasa, an inability to conceive, an inability to hold a pregnancy, addiction. I could go on and on. My child's not accepted. The human journey and the tests that build us and that reveal our souls are they're huge. And all you have to say when you get on a mic is, be more tznius, and healing shouldn't happen in unconventional ways. Get to work. Sit down, open the sichos, open the maimarim, put together a group of men that you trust. You have the index of what hurts us. And if you don't, we're more than happy to tell you what goes on in our lives as private women and men. And let's start codifying the Rebbe's teachings. I'm sorry, I'm screaming.
Good, that's good. You're not screaming.
Let's start codifying this. The Rambam codified halacha, and this one codified this, and this one. How many years are you going to come at us and tell us we're not allowed to heal? And you're in the most insane and lack of supportive way. It's unbelievable to me that my biggest obstacles to healing look like rabbanim. They look like men with beards and women with fancy suit jackets and wigs. Like, when I had to come back to my soul's truthful version of tznius, I had my journey with modesty and dressing well, dressing appropriately. And I was also somewhat, as much as I adhere to halacha and I have a deep reverence and I surrendered, I have a carved knife in my kitchen from the time I didn't plan on saying this. It feels uncomfortable, but it came out. I'm careful about brushing hair on Shabbos. From my grandparents, I have this awe and this reverence of what I don't understand. I will commit to understanding. I will show up for myself, and I will one day have the answers. And in the meantime, I hold my pain. I validate my confusion. I don't have to let go of it because I don't know. There's a God, and He's wondrous, and He's been there for me in every single day, in so many moments. He's revealed Himself, and We're going to get to the bottom of this. And I hold my lack of knowing together, and I move ahead, and I move, and I plunge, so I come to this modesty, and I say, I'm ready for my soul's truth of tznius. I don't want to hear from halacha. Don't tell me what page the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch talks about it. The one time my school brought someone in to talk about tznius in a direct way, they brought a man who, it was to teenage kids. But so when I'm talking to this healer that I work with in Tzfat, and I was sharing with her as a friend, we became close. And I told her, like, I really want to embrace my soul's version of modesty, but I don't want to hear about it from a kitzur. I don't want to hear about it. I'm not even asking what halacha is. I want to know my soul's truth. And I was getting like that messaging from different places in my life that I would like to know my truth. It came from me wanting to know it.
Yes.
And she told me, after this conversation, I planned on going to the Arizal, write a letter, and I'll read it there. And I wrote my letter and I sent it. And I'm in the middle of cooking on a Friday, and before I know it, I am crying and I'm sobbing. And I drop it in and I go and I realize, like, half of the pain is that I'm crying that in order for us to come back to our most sacred truths that God wants us to hold and know, and I'm thinking about the women and the friends and the people that I love, and I'm thinking, like, in order for you to come here, you know what you're going to have to face? Such a perverted klipa, he looks like a rabbi. You're going to have to fight through this line of defense. The line of defense that klipa is up to, the where we're holding in our story, is that klipa is already embodying the most sacred-looking roles. And maybe this is not news. Maybe it's probably not news. This has probably been going on forever. But to me and my pure self, I was like wrecked. I was deeply pained that in this journey and in this battle, the way that modesty was always used as the problem and the problem and the problem, they literally took women and they pushed them farther and farther away from their light. They buried us, and they buried men, and they buried children. They wanted things to become healthier and holier, and they wanted more light. And the way that they went about it just pushes it farther and farther apart and deeper in. Talk about porn, talk about addiction, talk about, even as I say this, I want to say that I don't really blame men or the Rabbanim or the teachers, because let's say Rabbanim, because I said that name too many times to not say this. I understand that the role that, from my understanding, my limited role, a Rav used to be someone that the community hired, that the community supported. They put together money to take care of his needs so that he could have an elevated state of consciousness, so that he could be in touch with his divine. And so we trusted him that if your needs are being met and you're a godly person who spends your time learning and talking and praying, you open your heart every single day, 3 times a day. You're dropping into your soul space. You're revealing that heart space. You have the humility to know that you need to go there. That you could be a guide, a source of guidance for us. That when we have a problem and we don't get to spend our life living in that insular, devoted way, you're going to know what to do. We're on the fly. Our child's in a crisis. We don't know what to do. We didn't have time to go to mikvah and fast for a few days and learn Torah and bring enough light and positivity to the problem to have clarity. And so you dedicate your life to that, and we come to you and we trust you. But I think at a certain point, with probably mostly financially related, we lost that sense. We lost the light. So we have the trappings of what this behavior, the role is there, but how in touch is he with the light? Could he if I went to someone in a leadership position and I told him, are you in touch with what to be in touch with God about? Do you know what a teenager goes through? Do you know what an adolescent child goes through? You have a community full of thousands of toddlers, thousands of babies that are sent into basements as their first introduction to education. We value children and neshama so much, we keep on pushing, have babies. We give you a hard time to not have babies with birth control. And the only place we have for you in our society, in larger communities, is in a rented, moldy basement in the bottom of a building somewhere or an apartment.
You're saying for schools?
For schooling. This is our support of you. This is where, and we have this crisis of loving people being the educators of our children. What are we doing about that? I could go on and on about the things that I wish we could address on a grander, bigger level. But my last podcast, I got a lot of feedback that I was so positive. So I don't know if I'm ready to give up that title and rip into the work we have. And that my hope is that I told Abi, my father told me yesterday, he was very supportive and loving. And he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing, go, don't stop. So I said, yeah, are you sure? Like I'm about to say something. So he said, yeah. So I said, I'm opening up a kollel and I'm opening up a men's yeshiva. So, well, actually, first he told me, first you should talk to this one, and then this one, he has plans for me.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I need a kollel and a yeshiva, not necessarily men, but people who learn. And I want to start codifying. I want to start organizing these maimarim and these. I will put my life on the line and say that it's so true what you're saying, that the answers are here. So bring it to the people. Like, let's start teaching this in a way where we don't have to go so... the argument that comes my way is Chassidus deals with the light. You're talking about working in the dark. Chassidus deals with the light. I don't think you have to go so deeply into the dark to make an index of the top 20 challenges that you hope Chassidus is coming to address. You know why once said that when he was teaching, his students would ask him to teach certain things to them. And he said, if you come up with the question, I'll give you the answer. Like, I'll teach you this taisvais or whatever you want to know, but do you have the question? Like, I feel that as a community, we push people not to be in touch with their question. Have children, get married, go on shluchos, bring Mashiach, move. Don't pause too long. It's the Yetzer Hara. You have pain, it's made up pain. And maybe we could, without going too deeply in the dark, without traumatizing children about marriage, and what we could, in a gentle way, address questions and be honest about what Chassidus is even coming to answer.
I agree with you. I think that, first of all, very well said. And I hope many people hear what you have to say. I've heard it a million times, this idea that Tanya has all the answers. And if whatever we need, Tanya has all the answers.
You know what that did to me?
It's ultimate gaslighting.
It took the Tanya away from me for 10 years. That's what it did to me. I won a Tanya Chidon in seminary. I didn't touch a Tanya again for 10 years. That's not true. That's actually not true. I learned Chitas the whole time I was in college. After college, I dropped it. I said, I couldn't. I let it come in from very roundabout places. Don't tell me Tanya has all the answers. What am I, dumb? I'm reading this stuff. I'm learning this. I'm trying. And I can't. I don't see where I'm addressed here.
Right. So, to me, it's the ultimate gaslighting because it's often said by someone who's not healed.
Right.
Right. So Tanya has all the answers for me or for you. Right. Who has got the healing from this thing? And really to bridge that gap is really, really, really important. And one of the things I was thinking of is one of the women who reached out to me over the last few weeks that led to the decision or the invitation to you for this podcast. I said, why are you reaching out to me? Like, she knew I was speaking to her husband already. I said, why are you reaching out to me?
Right.
I don't have your specific experience. Like, maybe talk to a woman, like talk to my wife, maybe Lea Rubashkin will make herself available. Maybe there's someone else, but I didn't have your experience. And she said, who else am I supposed to speak to? I can't speak to my friends. I can't speak to my family. I can't speak to anyone about this. So, which is very similar to what you're saying. So here we have a frum community where someone is struggling with something that actually many people struggle with. It's probably one of the more common problems that exists in families today is
abuse and addiction. I don't know what you were going to say, but
I was going to say addiction, like sexuality, like all of these things around sexuality is probably within marriages They say porn destroys more marriages than anything else today. And it's everything that comes with porn. Even the example of the gentleman I gave earlier, which has a beautiful family that he's willing to give up simply because he wants more sexual experiences.
Right.
And to me, that's porn culture, right? That's all of that.
Right.
Let's try to satiate our sexual desires, and let's pursue that in some way. So you have here a woman who's in an Orthodox community, surrounded by this Tanya culture, so to speak, and there's no one for her to talk to, which means there's no culture of honesty, there's no culture of support, there's no culture of truth. There's some other culture that's permeating this. So that's my first point.
I think that's why I stepped up for this. I feel that if I want to practice what I'm preaching, and I'm a little hard. I go hard on this topic a little bit, and I'll share a little. Like lately, my friend and I had this conversation with her. I said, like, sometimes I read the Torah and I wonder, like, I read a pasuk and I'm like, oh, what's Rashi going to say on this? And there's nothing said. And I'm like, if a woman was writing a perush on Torah, she was commentating on the Torah. If we had women who were commentators, I wonder what the Torah would look like. Like concepts that are so emotionally connected to a woman's journey here, and how, for whatever reason, it wasn't the time, or women were not holding that role, not allowed. I'm not going to go there. I don't know. But I wonder if, like, this Torah Chadasha that we say, this Torah Chadasha, that we're going to have a new Torah in the times of Mashiach, maybe it's the Torah that's commentated by the other gender. Maybe when women will be able to show up to this role and penetrate these rabbanim and all of the walls and barriers to owning our story, to owning our soul, to owning our truth. What does it mean? Like sometimes I say, like, Avi, like, what do they say on, like, the years of fertility struggles? Like, I want to see what are they talking about here? And, like, it could be silent. Or there's so many examples that I go to, like Sarah Iminu. She's abducted by Paro. The first Jewish woman, she has in her system the energy of being abducted. The same thing happens to Rivka Iminu. Like, our wives are being abducted from the get-go. What do we want to say about that? What are we? And I feel like women have so much to say about this because it's our story from the experienced side. Not to say that men are not abused. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if there is a container.
I think what you said is the man's voice has been represented.
Very. I mean, if only men will go further, and I think that will happen when women will show up to the scene and start creating these safe spaces to talk about every topic. Like, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about certain topics, mikvah, other things that come up. But right now, this feels like the only platform that we can talk about very hard, truthful parts of life. And there might be, more appropriate ways to support women. But right now, this is what we're working with. I'm saying, let's say this woman, in this Tanya culture, and I'm showing up here for her. I'm showing up from the phone calls that I got over the years and from my own experience. We have a way to go to create safe spaces where these concepts are being held and aired out. And if this could inspire or let people who are on the fence, who have a light inside of them, know that we desperately need you to show up with your light. And everyone's been on a journey. Everyone has some wisdom to share. And if you feel like you're a person, should I create something? Or I think it would be fair to say, like, let's create more safe spaces. Let's create more conversations. Let's create places where people could find compassion from each other for what they went through, what they're going through.
Right. Before we started recording, you mentioned some contrast between, like, pity and compassion.
Yeah.
Right. Without going to that detail, but now you've just mentioned the word compassion. So one of the things I was thinking about a lot recently is like kind of how things that sound very similar, let's say pity and compassion, they're worlds apart. Why? Because if I pity someone, I've created separation between them. If I have compassion for someone, the word means compassion, like compassion, which is like with like suffering. It's like I suffer with the other person. There's something I don't know, like united about that journey. When I pity someone, I distance them. When I have compassion for someone, I bring them close. Like we're united. We're on the same journey. We've suffered in some way. In recovery, they'll often say, listen for the similarities, not the differences. Right. So like when I was speaking to one of the women about our experience, and I said, I'm not like, you got a lot of work in front of you, and I've spoken to your husband, right, and I'll continue to provide the support, and whatever happens will happen. But I just want to let you know, I was in this place. My wife was in this place that you're talking about. And today we're married with 3 kids, and we have a beautiful family and a beautiful relationship. It's possible. So she says, yes, but it didn't happen when you were married. I said, true. Like it didn't. It 100% didn't. My wife wasn't cheated on when she was married. True. Different experience. She didn't find out when she had 15 years under her belt with me. She found it after a year. There were a lot of differences in the experiences, for sure. And there are also people who had it closer to your experience that made it to the other side. What I was focusing on was like the looking at the unity of the experience, like the similarities of the experience. And the more we do that as well. And there's something about the article that I read, right, of the rabbi speaking out against this modalities, that's like an us and them, right? Like here we are and they are going to these other modalities and something else, where there is truth to the point. Like when I read the article, I understand what he's saying. Like I understand what he's driving at, is that when you send people out to these places, there's a lot of there's a lot of ideas that could be mixed in that are very toxic.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people have brought up, for example, Gabor Mate, which many have leaned on his ideas and his wisdom as a way to heal from addiction and other things. But now we see that there are some ideas that are completely anathema to us. We want nothing to do with some of these ideas. And then you start wondering which ideas are clean and which ideas are not clean. Right. And one of the beauties of going into Torah to pull these ideas out is the confidence that they're clean, right? They're not mixed in with other stuff. So Brene Brown, when I heard her talk about politics, I could not read her books anymore. Right. Why are you talking to me about these?
I want to interject and say that my experience, and I've heard this from a few people, not many, because I don't like talking about this in public. I literally hold myself back as a value not to talk about certain positions of leadership. I don't want to go there. And it came up, and I am trusting the signs. But I'll tell you that growing up, I was privy to a bit of a leadership, an eye into a little bit of what was going on in leadership around the communities. And I will say that my father was so strict about shielding us from this information. Anytime a conversation came up, he literally sent us out of the room. And I was angry at him. I'm like, don't start a conversation in front of me that you're not willing to have. Like, where's the respect? But and I appreciate today that he was really, really shielding and not looking to, we don't speak Lashon Hara. We don't do that. It's not a family culture and value. And his work brought in hard conversations, and he maintained one boundary I know he knows how to maintain. That was the boundary he held. And I walked from whatever the energies came and whatever the energies of my own story. I don't know where, this idea came to me, how it was formed, a little bit from that, a little bit from, and in my journey, even as I was being loyal to Torah, I had a voice in my mind that wondered about the validity of them. Of like, what is this Tana? What is this Amora? What is this? Like, I took it in and it was giving me life, and there was a certain truth that I was living with, but up to a point. I didn't buy all the way in. I kept myself at like a certain and I just assumed that the Rabbanim of today and the leaders, the people in leadership positions of today looked like they did back then. And I projected that belief. It was naive, it was childish, and with time I came to see things a little bit more broadly. But I don't know why am I sharing this? I'm sharing, I guess, how hard it was for me to fight for the truth and to tell my inner child and to tell my parts of like, what you know, and now we need a new knowing. Like I pushed to know something better than what I was holding on to and to see things from a different perspective and not to stay loyal to those beliefs. And they were very fierce opponents. They were so guarded. They were so righteous. They looked so real. And I'm like, I don't want to believe in that. I need more than that. And so I pushed past those to really go on a relationship of knowing Torah, of knowing these Tanaim and Rabbah, like who I have so much gratitude and reverence for today. So yeah, it was a real hurdle to get through, and I think I'm sharing that in case anybody else has a shared experience of where our Masorah comes from, where our tradition is being passed along.
You were saying that in response to me saying like that in Torah, like we know we're getting clean information.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You're saying that you didn't always see it that way.
Yeah, I wondered. It didn't. Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying that I did always, but as it stands today, right? When I read, I haven't picked up a Brene Brown book for a while, right? But there are certain books, like for example, The Gifts of Imperfection, which profoundly changed me. And I highlighted it and read it and reread it and referred back to it and shared it with others. Like there was a lot that I got in it. I got out of it. But then when I started hearing her talk about politics, I'm like, how can I trust this woman in that way? So contrast that to the way I'll read a Sikha today, where I'll come to something and say, like, I can bank on this. I can bank on this information. I can lean on it. I've seen where his work goes, right? I feel like I've seen the Rebbe's heart to some degree. And that's not to say that we also can't say very clearly that there are some things in his community that are not there. And if they were there, then according to him, Mashiach would be here. Right? So we obviously have a way to go. But one of the things, like back to the letter that I would say, besides for it being the ultimate gaslighting, is provide a solution. Meaning when you say don't go looking for those alternate modalities, it's been in Tanya. I knew Tanya before I knew the alternate modality.
Right.
The modality is actually alternate to Tanya, right? That was the original one that was introduced. So clearly there was something that was, there was a bridge that I wasn't able to cross before. So to the same people who shut down Call of the Shofar, to the same people attacking these modalities, is you obviously have people thirsty for something. So then don't just say it's in Tanya, show it. Show us how it's in Tanya. And maybe one way you can show is share a struggle in your own life. We know it's there. Share a struggle in your own family. We know it's there. And then share with us how the Tanya, how a Sikha, how a Maimer has become relevant to that problem. But without it, we're just being gaslit. And you're going to feel good about giving a speech, and it's not going to impact anyone. It's just you're singing to the choir, so to speak. The people who already believe in you are going to say, oh, look, here I have another proof of the support. And the people who already don't believe what you're saying because their life experience has shown them otherwise are just going to have one more reason to distance themselves from you.
Yeah, well said.